So we have notes here for Joshua, Judges, and Ruth, and I will send soft copies of these things tonight. This is around your table.
Ibuka Session, and then you link it on the chat.
Is there someone coming here?
No.
No, okay. Okay, I've been teaching for the last 30 years, 40 years really, because I taught in the US as well. And this is always traditionally the most difficult class to stay focused in. Normally at the end of this class I see people doing that. But I'm hoping to keep us engaged. Fortunately, they're interesting books. And so it's Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. And obviously in an hour and a half we can't do an exhaustive study, but I want to highlight some things that I think are worth talking about. Now, one of the things you will notice is that we're not looking at all the videos that I have in your notes. But they're there for your resource. If you want to look them up, it's easy to do it. You need another set of notes? Okay, this is the last set. We'll go maybe there's two sets here. One more. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 or more? Got 15 in the class because I told them 18. But,
2 are not around.
Are they coming tomorrow?
No.
Probably not. Okay. Are they from another country?
1.
Okay.
Actually 3. The 3 of them were missing.
We have 14 here.
I just counted 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
3 are missing.
3 are not here. And they won't be in this class. They're not coming late or anything like that. Okay.
Actually,
So just take note of the fact that these videos are there if you want to access them.
No,
Okay. Oh, good. Okay. Thank you for doing that. Good. Okay. So you're missing which ones? The morning sessions. Yeah, and someone addressed me for, I don't know why there's not more copies. Maybe they're laying around somewhere. Because I had the same amount for everything, but they were left this morning for me. But I don't have any up here. More. Anyway, but I'll send soft copies and you can make copies of the existing ones. Okay, so am I clear on the videos? They're very interesting videos. They're short, but you might want to look at it. We're going to look at one, the very last one, the Book of Ruth. But I'm not going to look at the Judges one or the Joshua one, because I think there's enough content that will carry them without the video. Okay, the Book of Joshua provides an overview of the military campaigns to conquer the land that God had promised. Following the exodus from Egypt and the subsequent 40 years of the wilderness wanderings, the newly formed nation is now poised to enter the promised land, conquer the inhabitants, and occupy the territories. So it starts out by Joshua preparing Israel on the other side of the Jordan to cross the Jordan and head into the promised land in chapters 1 through 5. So in chapter 1, we see something. We see that Joshua succeeds Moses as leader. In fact, you can add another verse in there, Deuteronomy 34:9. It happens at the end of Deuteronomy, where Moses commissions Joshua to be his successor. And then those verses that I have in next to chapter 1 are the people acknowledging him as their leader. So let me ask you a question. I've heard this phrase repeated, and I want to see what you think about it. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? So, do you agree with that statement, or do you disagree with that statement, or do you want to modify that statement? Which means you gently disagree, but it's almost true or something.
No success
So,
without a
what do you think? No success without a successor. Yes, Kennedy.
Maybe modify it a little bit
Okay.
because the statement seems like still it has to be a successor you have intentionally mentored. Or somehow leadership heads back and there will be someone to succeed you. But then unless you have prepared a successor.
Oh, I see. So you may have a successor, but it wasn't any of your work.
Yes.
You know, somebody else did it and you just were fortunate.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say that well, let's take Joshua. Not Joshua, yeah. Moses was a very good leader. He left Joshua behind. So apparently this was not a problem for him. Later we're going to talk about Joshua not having a successor. In fact, I don't mind jumping ahead. You could argue that Joshua was a pretty effective leader, but he neglected preparing a successor, and no one else came in to bail him out, or coincidences didn't happen to some unusual person rose up on his own, which sometimes happens. But they were left for a long time with random leaders that God had to pull out of his hat because there was problems. The judges. So, what about this statement? Let's continue to talk about it. Yes.
Trying to clarify something.
Yes.
So here you mean no success for an outgoing leader if he has not left a success. Because then we could talk about
yes. That's what
the leader who inherits.
That's what that statement is saying.
Okay. All right.
So, what do you think? Is it a true statement or not? I'm looking for that. Oh, here it is. What do you think, Oscar?
I think can swing either side. What I mean by that is
Sounds like you're avoiding the question.
okay.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
Let me talk about Pastor Oscar and Pastor Nick.
Okay.
For us who are not congregants of Nairobi Chapel,
Yes.
Pastor Oscar has raised a successor, but does not necessarily guarantee that that successor is going to do a great job at leading.
That's true.
So what I mean is, he can be successful,
Right.
or he cannot be successful depending on the ability or the inability of the person. That
I'll use another example. I worked with Justice Kamal for a long time to be my successor at the campus director. And when he became a campus director very quickly, but the regional office liked him, and they took him too soon. And so he had been working with David Sonyi, and Sonyi's a good guy, but Justice hadn't been able to work with him very long. And so Sonyi was only the campus director for a brief while, and then he went on to more suitable colleagues for him. So I worked hard, so it's the opposite thing, to prepare this guy, and then circumstances took him away. Now, he did a very good job in Botswana, so that was a blessing to the kingdom of God. But I was a bit disappointed. I remember being that way. But the question is, if you don't have a successor, Nick is there for Oscar, then Joshua's a good example. Was Joshua a good leader? Was he successful?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
let's define success.
See, that's
then.
what that's. Okay, well, I'm not defining it. It just gets us to think about it. I'm not going to define it clearly. You know what success means, but what do I mean by it? That's for us to sort out as we're talking. Because what it does, what these kind of questions do, just for your own teaching benefit, is it causes you to explore this idea of a successor a little more carefully than saying, yeah, you need a successor. Let's move on. Yes, Anne, did you have your hand up? Yes. There, yes, please.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think for the person who does not have a successor, they're looking at themselves and the legacy they're going to leave, which is a good thing in terms of God has given me this opportunity, I have to do this and this and this and this. But they're failing to look at the big picture, which is that this is God's story.
Right.
After me, there will be others, and before me, there were others. So that even as I get into a leadership position, I know I'm not the last one. So I get in it knowing that, yes, God has given me this period. I want to be effective, but I also want to raise someone else who will take over.
Right. And clearly that's what Moses thought, because he was very careful to in fact, he even laid hands on him in Deuteronomy. That's what that verse says. He missioned them, but he had been working with them for a long time. Joshua had already shown a lot of faithfulness along the way. But yes, what were you going to say, Chucky?
I think you can look at it from the point of the agenda God has, the way Anne is saying.
Yes.
So that there's a button that is being
that's good.
passed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you just look at one person and what God did through that person, you can justify it.
Yes.
If that was success or not.
Yes, good point.
But maybe what we are looking at is the main story as we are going through time.
Right.
And the history.
Right.
Was it successful from one person to another?
Because after he left, the nation of Israel, which was his agenda, his mission, to plant them firmly in the land so that they would declare the righteousness of God to the nations and be a blessing. That was the agenda. They weren't just supposed to just have good stuff to eat. They were supposed to have good stuff to eat so they could be strong, so they could fulfill their agenda. So after Joshua did a very good job in here. A pretty good job. I mean, I think most people would say he was a good general and good leader. Well, God did that.
Fought many battles.
When we get to Elisha, we're going to talk a little bit about that. You know, how much power actually do prophets have? None. All their power comes from God. And and we have to be careful because in Kenya today, we give these prophets too much credit.
Yeah.
So either they're true prophets or false prophets, and even if they're true prophets, they're not prophets in their own right. They're prophets because they heard something from God and are just messenger boys. That's all they are, if they're true prophets. And if they invent things on their own or they dream up imaginations of their own, that's a terrible thing. I won't name names, but you probably know who specifically I'm thinking. He has a church right up here.
There was one at the Guru Park yesterday.
Oh, really? Don't name names.
Moving on swiftly.
Are you there?
So, no success without a successor. You can argue that Joshua did a very good job here, but he had a fatal flaw. Now, if he had lived through it, it's like Solomon. Solomon started well, but he didn't finish well. Joshua finished well on his own, but he didn't finish well in his legacy. So that's an important thing to consider as a leader. So let me make it personal. Some of you currently have responsibilities. You're the head of campus, you're head of some of the other emphases that they have, leader-led, you're head of online, whatever they call that now. But so you have a team that reports to you, and you're leading them. Some of you will have. Let me ask, who are you building to succeed? To be your successor? There's somebody on your team that has shown a knack for what you're doing, that shows promise, faith, integrity. Yes.
There's a joke that Arnold usually cracks.
Oh, good.
He says that once you seem to be grooming someone, maybe more than two things will happen, but two of the possibilities that can happen is that people will actively start opposing that person, or that person will work towards your exit very fast.
So does he really believe that?
Oh, I think that was a joke.
Oh, good.
I hope that was a
Because,
joke.
because that's a perspective that's out there.
Happy to say
But
it.
I honestly think it's one of those paradigms of the world.
Yeah.
It's a paradigm of the world, and we need a different paradigm. And the paradigm is you serve people, you enable people, you equip people, even if they get bigger than you. Timothy Mwangi was my disciple. He's twice the man I am right now.
Man,
He's having twice the impact I am right now.
man.
And that's okay. Now, it's easy for me to say that because I'm a missionary and I'm supposed to do that. If I was a paid position and I lost my job and now I have to do some sweeping, I would be frustrated. But rarely will people who build men underneath of them, or women for that matter, rarely will they have to go down very far. They usually go over or up. But regardless of that, what you said was very key. This is what matters, not you as a leader. Do you see that? It's the vision and the mission that matters. It's what God has called us to accomplish that matters. It's not your reputation or your salary or your status or your fame. Those things may come and they might not come. But God has not called us to be famous. He's called us to be fruitful. God has not called us to be wealthy necessarily. He might, but He's called us to be fruitful. And so our objective is to work on this. And the mistake that Joshua made was he wanted to be a good leader, but he lost sight to some degree on the legacy of after he was gone. And so that was a mistake because he was called to more than just performing. Am I a good leader? Yeah, I think I'm a good leader, but that's not enough of a question. The question is the agenda that God has called me to accomplish, am I going to take the baton in my hand and give it to someone else? Now, we might be lucky, like Kennedy was talking about, someone will pop out of nowhere. But it's clear that we need to have that as part of our agenda. And it's something that's lacking. Presidents make the mistake, pastors make the mistake, leaders make the mistake of forgetting. Now, we do need to be careful when we mentor someone. Mentor a lot of people, especially those that report to you, directly to you. And you're not going to have more than, hopefully you're not having more than 10 or 12 people reporting directly to you. If you have more than that, the leadership research tells us that that's not wise. Because for each person that you're working with, you need to develop a relationship with them, you need to understand them, you need to motivate them according to who they are, you need to know well the condition of your flock. And so if you have too many people reporting to you, that's a bad infrastructure, a bad hierarchical structure. So you need to have few people, and they're the ones that you pour your life into. And you can do it equally, but keep your eyes open. Who are the people that someday you're going to recommend to Della or to Farai? This guy needs to take over for me. Or to Zoba. This guy can take over for me. This lady can take over for me. I had to talk Mambaleo into letting me make Justice campus director. Because the first thing he said to me was, you know Justice, right?
Yes.
Mambaleo said, he's too quiet. He's too quiet. And I said, no, he's not too quiet. When you see him in a staff meeting, he's really good with people in a small group, and he can even speak well. He has a soft personality, yes, but that doesn't make a bad leader. In my opinion, one of your best presidents over the last few years I've been here 32 years, was Ibuka. He didn't have a great personality, but I hear that he did really well behind closed doors and with his followers. And so you may debate that. It's always dangerous to bring political because there's parties and there's factions and all that kind of stuff. You try, yeah, right. So, but the point is, this is what matters. What has God called you to do, and how can it best be done, even if it's best done by somebody else? I think I can. But the question is, what needs to be done, and how can it be done best, even if it's done by somebody else? That is, your subordinates. I know that Timothy Mwangi is smarter than I am. In fact, I have to tell you a story. When I first came here in Kenya in 1988, I was a benign, shall I say it? Sorry? I thought my American background made me more advanced. And I was sitting with, I don't know if you knew who Ken Kaduki is. I had a Bible study. Timothy Mwangi, Ken Kaduki, who's now the head of the physics department at Jerome campus, at least he was recently. Agri Agunya and Agri Marahana, it doesn't matter if you know them, but these guys, we were sitting talking philosophy, theology, science, all kinds of, I was a physics major, so I like to talk science. So I'm talking to these guys, we're talking about things, I'm laughing, we're talking about things, and all of a sudden we're talking and I realize, and I'm gonna do a mild swear. Oh my God. I'm the dumbest guy in the room. I'm the dumbest guy in the room. And I was surprised. And I was surprised that I was surprised. And I realized that these guys knew more than me. Not just, and I wasn't surprised just because they were Kenyans, but because they were my subordinates, quote unquote. But also because they were Kenyans. And I realized I had too much patronizing in my bloodstream. I'm being patronizing. And these guys are stronger than me. I need to respect them more than I respect myself. And it's kept me here for 32 years, frankly. I think it was a secret of staying here for 32 years. But, and it's the reason why we're leaving next year and I'm going to cry all the way home. It's just, God has said it's time for you to go. It's time for you to go. My point is this. It's not about us as leaders. It's about the agenda that God's given us. God gave Joshua an agenda, yes, to be a good leader while he was a leader. But it was more than that. It was beyond his leadership. So don't forget to leave well a position of responsibility. And that has to do with a lot of mentoring, and a lot of succession issues. Okay. Let's move on. Any questions or comments?
Sorry, I came in late. I got that discussion, but I realized the difference between Moses' leadership and Joshua's leadership. Moses worked with his servant Joshua.
Yes.
And he had Aaron, he had Hur, he had several people in his inner circle. But I don't seem to see anyone Joshua was with.
Yeah. You don't see it. You don't see
You don't
it.
see an
Sidekick.
armor bearer,
Yeah,
a servant. You don't see
Yeah.
You don't see a Jonathan.
Well, he does some things. He also puts up the wants things, which we're going to talk about. But, yeah. Any other comments? You had a comment. Yes.
Who was the successor of Joshua?
Who was?
Yes.
That's the question. Nobody.
Hey.
See,
Was he also succeeded in what he did? Because
no, that was, and so what happens after Joshua is this terrible period called the Judges. And the phrase in Judges is, each man did, there was no king in Israel, each man did what was right in his own eyes, which is the description of society today.
And the word of God was rare in those days.
Yes. So he had no successor, that's the point, so it's a great question.
Who is the successor? I said,
Yes.
I'm trying to wonder, again, this is not what the Bible says, just making it.
Okay.
What's the end? I think it talks about me and my house serving the Lord. So I'm wondering, is he probably trying to bring his sons and maybe fire?
Possibly. You know, that's the, when you use your imagination like that, now you need scripture to confirm it, but that's how you can really explore the color and the nuance and the details of scripture, which is very good in that. So it's possible that maybe I'm just giving him a hard time, and there's nothing recorded about his little people that were helping him and he was mentoring, and there's nothing recorded there, and just because it's not recorded doesn't mean it's not there. But the inspired writer did not record anything. Whoever wrote the story of Joshua.
Question.
Yes.
Is there a possibility that he was a type of Christ? And so,
He was what?
a type of Christ,
Who? Joshua?
yes.
In what regard?
Which means there was no one with this kind of calling to give the baton to.
but Christ was.
But Christ himself.
He knew.
Anyway, nobody has
and nobody ever will.
And it's a court. They're allowed to think.
Yeah. No, that's good, that's good.
Yeah.
So, well, the whole thing about Jesus' ministry is that he spent 3 years training his 12 and encouraging the 12 to do the same. And so it's kind of ironic that what Kennedy would talk about earlier happened because Paul popped up. And even though Jesus didn't disciple Paul directly, he was discipling him indirectly through God's sovereignty in Paul's life. Okay, let's move on to Rahab, chapter 2. Rahab saved from death and sin by faith. Rahab's an interesting character because she was saved by lying. Did you notice that? She lied. She hid the guys up in the roof, put the flax over them, and the people came and said, "Where are they? They're here." No, they're not here. She saved them by lying. Why does she get so much credit for lying? What do you think? What's that? No, it's the father of lies. It's the father of lies. No, she's not. She's not, but she listened to the father of lies. She did. She listened to the father of lies by lying.
I think it's because she.
Sorry?
I think it's because she believed in the God of Israel. When the spies comes, she tells them the way the Lord has cut how the Lord delivered them, and they were all trembling. That's why they had even shut the gates and all. So I think she believes in the God of Israel.
I think that's exactly right. I think she was saved by faith. And she said, "I'm a sinner." She was a prostitute, on top of everything. And so she didn't get saved because she lied. She's saved because she said, "I'm putting my future destiny in the hands of this God." And that's what she decided to do. She wasn't a perfect person, but you're not saved by works. You're saved by putting your hands and trusting in this God who you believe is the one true God. Not only that, but what do we know about Rahab other than the fact that she was welcomed into the people of Israel?
Dr. Bill,
She what?
what does this mean to us now? I mean, if she lied,
Yes. So go and lie.
she was saved by
Go and lie. No, she was saved in spite of her sin because she trusted God, just like we were saved in spite of our sin.
We also lied.
And we also lied. In fact, even right now, I'm going to get into a little bit of theology. Right now, most of us sitting here are sinning as we sit. Because you have traces of pride in you that have not been rooted out yet. So do I. You have traces of selfishness that have not been rooted out yet. You want to have the smartest answer when you raise your hand. There's a part of you that wants to say, well, Juanita would say, "Oh, that was a brilliant insight you had." You know, and we have all these agendas that are still polluting as students and as teachers. So, but we're forgiven because we're in Christ. And his blood covers us, and in addition to covering us, transforms us. So hopefully in 2 weeks, we'll be 2 weeks better than we are now, if we keep walking with him, because he continues to transform us. Rahab was saved despite her sin, just like we are saved despite our sin, by faith. She read, "I'm putting my hands I'm putting my destiny in the hands of this God," and that's what saved her. Anyway.
I have imagined that if someone walked into our house and did that looking for my daddy,
Yes.
and asked me, "Is your daddy?"
Right. I would say no. No, he's not. He's in China. And I would feel no guilt because it's the gun issue. It's a literal gun issue. If someone points a gun at my head, then you're forcing me to behave in a way that I normally wouldn't. So you might get me to punch somebody if you put a head, I don't know if you get me to kill somebody, but you could get me to do a lot if you put a gun to my head. Now again, I'm not 100% sure I'm right on that, but it's one of these ethical things that you have to decide. When on the elders, we have this all the time. We will come up with an issue like, can you remarry divorced people, for example? And you look at the scripture and you try to come up with an answer and people disagree. And one time I said to Oscar, I can't make up my mind. And he said, Bill, you don't have that option here. You have to decide. We have to tell these people whether we're going to marry them or not. And so sometimes there's ethical choices that you're not 100% clear on, and you just have to have the courage to say, Lord, I'm doing this in good faith. I'm trusting. I don't know if this is right or not, but I have to make a decision here. And I don't know which way to go, but I have to pick one. So you pick one. And so in that case, you have to pick one. Most of the time we know, though. Most of the time, the bride is not, the policeman is going to take you to the cell, he's going to take you to, you have to come up with 5,000. I just came out of court 2 days ago. I was up at Kibera Courts, and 15,000 shillings. And I was at this roundabout just over here, green light. No, I was at a roundabout down by Nyayo Stadium. I was coming down on Mombasa Road, trying to get over into the center lane because I want to turn right to go down into industrial area. And there's two big Tatas are there, and they won't let me in. I got my blinker on, and I'm sort of trying to get my car over. In the meantime, I'm still moving into the roundabout. So I'm still in the left lane of the roundabout, and I tried to get around, and the police were saying. So I knew I was cooked. So why did I get into that? Oh, and I knew how I got into it. He said, what can I do to help you? What can I do to help you? And I knew what he was saying. It's obvious. And I just said, if I just give him 1,000 shillings, I can go home. Wouldn't that be nice, just to go home? And I said, I just want to do the right thing. I'm a guest in your country, and I serve Jesus, and I want to do the right thing. What's the right thing? And he said, come to the police station with me. Really? So I went to the police station, and my whole day was shot. Because they didn't have the 5,000. I had to call my daughter. She had to bring me the 5,000. It just was a mess. And then I had to go to court the next day, and I waited all morning. They said, we don't have your file. You don't have my file? No, just come back tomorrow. Oh, thank you. So, point is, sometimes going with compromise is something we can just do. It's just painful. We'll just have to do it. That's not a gun to my head. Nobody put a gun to my head. So, lying is always wrong, and it was wrong for Rahab to do it. But she wasn't saved because she lied or didn't lie. She was saved because she put her trust in the God of Jesus. Yes?
I want to read like my sister had read Hebrews 11.
Okay.
Verse 31. It talks about Rahab.
Yes.
The New Living Translation says that it was by faith that Rahab, the prostitute, was not destroyed with the people in her city who refused to obey God. For she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Another version I'd like to say is, contemporary English version says that Rahab had been a prostitute, past tense, but she had faith and welcomed the spies. So she wasn't killed with the people who disobeyed.
Yeah. And once she became part of the Israeli community, she got exposed to the law. She heard lying was wrong. She heard prostitution was wrong. And she conformed her life. And she married a nice Jewish man. And she had a child, or 2 or 3. And one of her children had a grandson for her. And the grandson's name was Boaz. Boaz married another non-Jew, Ruth, and became the part of Christianity. And so it's just the way God worked it out. And we have 2 non-Jewish women in the line of the direct line of the Messiah. So that both Rahab and Ruth are great grandmothers, or whatever the sequence is, of Jesus himself. So it's a really remarkable thing and it leads to this other issue, which we're going to talk to with the army of the Lord, the commander of the army of the Lord. We're going to wait for that first, because there's something else that happens. Chapters 3 and 4, Israel crosses the Jordan and enters the promised land. Now, what did God promise Joshua? He said the priests should go first with the ark, And as soon as their feet touched the water, what would happen? The river would part and dry up. But you know what happened? They stood there and waited for a while. Because as soon as the feet went in, if you look, let's turn Joshua chapter, was it 3 or 4, verses 14 through 17, but I didn't put the chapter there. It's probably 4. Look at 4, 14 through 17. If someone can find that and read it to me, I think that will tell me whether it's 4 or 3.
On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him, just as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. And the Lord said to Joshua, command the priests bearing the ark of the testimony to come up out of the Jordan. So Joshua commanded the priests, come up out of Jordan. And when the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord came out from the midst of the Jordan, the soles of the priests' feet were filled up with dry ground. The waters of Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks.
Okay, that was the end of the situation. I'm talking about the very beginning, so maybe I got the wrong verses there. But what does 3:14 through 17 say? Maybe that's it. Does someone have chapter 3, verses 14 through 17? It's when the priests go up to the edge of the river and go into the water, and the water.
Verse 14 says, so when the people broke camp across the Jordan, the priests carrying the ark of the covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flat stage, all green and harvest. Yet, as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan, and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from the upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in the hill, a great distance away, at a town called Adam, in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the sea of the Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off, so the people crossed over opposite Jericho.
Okay, did you notice the detail there? It stopped way upstream at another town. It's probably about 5 kilometers up, if you look on the map. And so they step in the water knowing that God said, as soon as your feet touch, this is what's going to happen. And it's flood stage. So the water's going pushing against their legs very seriously. And so they're thinking, do we need to keep going? Or should we stop here or what? So I think they probably stopped and they were waiting. And they were waiting. And they're waiting. And they're thinking, is this going to happen or not? This is flood stage water. And I'm starting to feel stupid here. This ark is pretty heavy on my shoulders. And maybe we should back up. And God has clearly not kept his promise. God has clearly not kept his promise. But he had. It was just upstream. And they had to wait for the water to go past and drain down. And then they could walk across. So God had answered the prayer exactly as he said, but not exactly as they understood. And God does that all the time. He does it all the time. And so when he makes a promise to us, sometimes we think he hasn't been faithful, but we realize later that he was faithful, just not in the way that we thought. So I'll give you a personal example. I was at Penn State University. I got saved. I was still in theater. My theater classes were way over on the other side of campus. And I was being late for all my classes because I had to come back and forth for Bible studies, and I still wanted to do my Bible studies. And I was praying about it, and the Lord said to me, I will provide you with transport. And I was convinced of that. And I knew it. And I told my friends, God's going to give me a car. He told me he's going to give me a car. And about 2 weeks later, I still didn't have a car. It's coming. God's going to get me a car. Finally, somebody came up to me and said, Bill, I have a bicycle. And I'm leaving at the end of the semester, which is next week. I'm going to give you my bicycle. And so I took the bicycle and I realized, I didn't have that much money for registration, for insurance, for petrol, for repairs, but I was fit. And what God said was, I'll give you transport. And I thought he meant a car, but it was a bicycle. And for the rest of my career at Penn State, I could go all over the place, and I got fit, and it was great. It was perfect. It was exactly what I needed. But, so just trust him, even if he says, I'm gonna make the water part, and it doesn't part right away, then just say, well, he did something, I don't know what it is, but he did something, and I'm just going to wait until I see what it is. Or I'm just going to go and see what happens, but you don't want to walk into raging waters. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting detail for that story, to have faith in that. Then the commander of the army of the Lord, first they circumcised themselves, which is not a very strategic thing to do. Let's say Jericho said, hey, they just circumcised themselves, let's attack now. They probably would have won, because you don't fight very well with a recent circumcision. And then they did the Passover to celebrate the Lord's deliverance, and in memory of that deliverance, so they would be able to bring their memory of God's faithfulness, just the way David did with the lion and the bear, and have confidence in the future. And then the commander of the army of the Lord, and he says, Joshua says, whose side are you on? Are you with us, or are you with our adversaries? And what does the angel of the Lord say? Neither. What did he mean by that? Well, for one thing, Rahab was there. And I actually think that God was hoping, God's sovereign, so I be careful my English language, my human language. But there was an opportunity for more Rahabs to happen. He's not against Jericho. He's against people preventing him from doing what he's trying to do. And there may have been more. He wanted Rahab to get saved, so certainly she was one of the adversaries that was not included in that. But there may be other reasons as well. But God is not willing that any should perish, even back then. And people were free to become Jewish citizens, or Jewish, whatever you call it, members of the Jewish community. They had to go through the rituals. They had to get circumcised their men. They had to do all the Torah stuff. That's what changed in Acts, but we're going to get to that later. But they had to become Jewish in the cultural sense. But there's the opportunity for them to become part of God's people was still there. And it was part of the agenda they gave to Israel, and Israel neglected it seriously to bring people into God's kingdom. Okay. Comments or questions before we get into the individual battles? Okay, Jericho. A very strategic location in Canaan, located near a water source, oasis. This city was attacked with a small force of soldiers and trumpeters. The city was miraculously delivered above and beyond normal cause-effect efforts. Despite the dramatic victory, Achan and perhaps other Israelites stole forbidden plunder. We'll talk about that in a moment. But second, point 2, AI, whatever you want to call it. Although facing a much smaller army, Israel was soundly defeated because the Lord withheld his blessing over the hidden plunder of Jericho. Achan was identified through a series of loss and was severely punished with his family, about as severe as you can be. The next attempt to conquer Ai succeeded, but this time careful military strategy prevailed. Now, what I want us to do is forget about Achan for a moment. What's the difference between Jericho and Ai 2? Ai 2, the second time they went out. What are some distinctions between those two battles? Some of you know the story well enough. Benson.
In the AI one, there was an ambush.
Yes.
From behind.
Yes.
And in Jericho, there was no ambush. They just blew the trumpets and shouted, and the walls came down.
So what are some distinctions between those two things?
For Jericho, they were given the battle strategy by God.
Yes.
But for
I said, you just say I? Or you're being kind to me by saying I. We would just call it I.
they drew the strategy. It was Joshua who drew the strategy.
I could argue, and I think you could argue, that both are given by God. But one was supernatural, and the other was more natural. Now, listen to the Great Commission. All authority has been given to me, where?
In heaven and on earth.
And on earth. And in heaven is literally in the heavens, in the heavenly realms, the supernatural realms. And on earth is in the natural realms. So both are of God, strategizing for a wise plan of attack, whether it's in ministry or in business production or government or church, is not ungodly. It is just as godly as supernatural stuff. Sometimes God will say, trust me with this, do it this way. And we have to do it that way. But sometimes he does it naturally. All authority is on earth with all the earthly rules and regulations and cause and effect, and in the heavens, where those are submissive or don't matter. Now, some people argue that the trumpets had a certain resonance that vibrated the walls enough to where they fell, and so they're trying to make everything natural. But I think it was just supernatural, obviously. And there are other examples too. Hailstorms killing the enemy. I know that's supernatural. But both are important, and you can't neglect one over the other. Now let's go back to Achan. I have a theory about Achan, and again, it's an imaginative theory, but I don't think it's ridiculous because I looked at the text very carefully, and what it says was there was plunder taken. God said there was plunder taken, so they took lots. And they identified a big clan group, and then they did it again with the clan group, and they came down with a smaller family group. And then they did it again with the family group. And they came down with a specific family, and I forget how much detail they went, how many steps they took to get to Achan. But eventually, they got to Achan. Well, here's my theory. There were probably 50 other soldiers shaking in their boots. Because they knew, I've got a piece of still buried in my tent. Oh, they got Achan. Oh, okay. Whew, I gotta get rid of this. I'll never do this again. I'll never do this again. And it was an example. It was an atonement on behalf of other people. But I would be very surprised if Achan was the only one out of all those soldiers with all that gold laying around. Apparently, I mean, he said I saw the gold ingots, and I saw all this stuff, and I took it. And I think probably other soldiers did too. But the point is, God identified them and purged it and dealt with it. And the reason they lost the first battle, they were overconfident, because even when they got off the battle in the morning, they said, we don't need that many. Let's just bring less. They were a bit arrogant, because they're thinking, yesterday we went well, so today will go well. So lesson. If you were successful last year, don't get cocky and think that you'll be successful this year. It's always dependence on the Lord. It's always dependence on the Lord. And so one of the worst threats to success is success. Because when you're successful, you get the false impression that you're pretty special all by yourself. And once you go there, look out. Yes?
There's another difference between the battle of Jericho and the battle of Ai.
Yes?
Is that Jericho involved everybody,
Okay.
men and women. But Ai, the first one, they left the women behind.
So are you a feminist?
No, I'm the opposite. What is the opposite? A malice or something? Malice.
No. Were there women with the Jericho group?
Sorry?
Were there women with the Jericho group?
No,
It was just men and soldiers.
So they what?
The women were too.
I think it was frozen.
Yes.
I don't think they mentioned women.
So I don't know. Maybe there were, but I don't remember seeing that there were women in the Jericho. But clearly, God withheld his blessing because of Achan and others, perhaps.
Yeah. And the other thing, personally, I don't believe that because it's not written, that there were other people that had taken.
No, it wasn't.
What I learned from the Achan story is that we are a body.
Yeah.
If one person sins,
Right.
the whole body is a sin.
Right.
Yeah, that corporate sense, individual corporate sense.
Yeah.
If one person say on this team is not fine, we are all not fine.
That makes sense. That makes sense. That could possibly be it. So, because again, I can't argue strongly from the text. All I can say is that it never says that Achan was the only one. It just says the lots fell to him. And so I think, well, maybe the lots fell to him as the representative, in the same kind of flip side, as the representative atonement for the sin of many people. Even though he was guilty, not like Jesus, wasn't guilty. But again, I'm stretching, so I'm not going to argue for because the text doesn't say anybody but Achan. Doesn't specifically say he was the only one. It just doesn't say he wasn't. Okay, Gibeonite deception, another good one. Men from Gibeon deceived Joshua that they were not Canaanites, but people from a far-off land. The evidence strongly supported their claim. They had old clothes, they had dried bread, their shoes were worn, all those things. But it was all contrived, because they did not inquire of the Lord, says in the text. Over their decision, Joshua and his men were fooled by the Gibeonite ruse. Now, I have the phrase there, compare to Rahab. Is there a comparison with Rahab?
Let me clarify the question. Compare exactly what to Rahab.
I'll give away too much.
They both lied. They have lied. Gibeonites lied. Just that they lied to people.
Say that again, Kenny?
They both lied.
They both lied.
Yes.
That's right. What did they also both do?
They got saved.
Well, again, that language is pretty strong. I don't know if I go that far, but I don't know if I wouldn't go that far. They did the same thing. You know what they said? We knew that these people were from God, and if we fight them, we will lose. So we need to go and put our trust in being part of that community. We also hear they have rules about loving one another. Maybe they'll be merciful. Maybe they'll be understanding. Let's go. So they went, and it worked. And in fact, there's an article, there's a good website called Desiring God. It's put out by John Piper. At least he originally put it out. Maybe he has other people doing it now. But and there's a whole article about the Gibeonites' faith. Because they did the same thing Rahab did. They said, we're going to put our destiny in the hands of these people and their God. And it rescued them. So that even later, when they were attacked by others, Joshua had to come and help them out. Well, that's how genuine Joshua took his pledge to them. Because they said, I want you to make a contract. So it was more than a promise, it was a covenant. So they made a covenant with them, and they kept to the covenant. But it's that same idea. Imperfect people coming to the God of Israel and saying, have mercy, we put our life in your hands. And they were saved by faith.
Yeah, I think there was also a scenario later on, possibly in Kings, in the time of King David,
Okay.
when I think either he killed or he was Saul, during Saul's time,
Okay.
when they took hold of Gibeonites, and then there was a drought in the land because they had gone against the covenant.
Yeah.
And when Saul, what do I think it's David? But anyway, when the king sought God, and it revealed to him that you have gone against a covenant made with the Gibeonites. And it was so. And then he had to various people. Actually, it happened during Saul's time, but the repercussions are manifested during King David's time.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had to kill all the descendants of Saul.
Okay.
And were peaceful.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd have to look into that subsequent story. It involves the Gibeonites too. Look into that. I'm not that familiar with that aspect of it. Okay, then there was the 5-king alliance. God provided another supernatural victory over the armies of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon by destroying more Canaanites by hail than by the sword, and by giving them a longer day to fight. stopping the sun, which was not Joshua that did that. Even with God's supernatural work, Joshua's men still had to walk all night to achieve the victory. So we see both.
Yeah.
We need both. The supernatural intervention, but also our role, our part. There was the natural and the supernatural. So they walked all night. So they started walking about 9 p.m., and they kept walking till midnight, and they kept walking till 3 a.m., and they kept walking till 5:30 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. when the sun came up. They're about the same meridian line as we are here. Israel, Jerusalem, and Nairobi, I think, have the same time zone. But so I don't know what that meant about when the sun came up and when the sun went down, but because we're too close, we're a lot closer to the equator. But okay, in southern cities, just another group of armies that came against them, and they were conquered. Even though there's a record of them being defeated earlier, that was their armies that were defeated. Later, they defeated the cities. Point 6, Hazar's Northern Alliance. Joshua hamstrings the horses, burns their chariots, wins. He sneaks into behind the scenes and destroys their equipment. So again, natural and supernatural. So let's pick up the pace a little bit here. Joshua divides the land. They pretty much conquered everybody, although there are still traces of Canaanites there. The tribal allotments are described there on the map to the right, but there were some special allotments. Caleb, who is still alive, he's old, but he's still alive and fit, was given a section called Horeb. Joshua was given Timnath-Serah, and then they also made the cities of refuge, 6 of them, which we know about.